we're going to go ahead. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Ruben Garcia. I'm the director of Annunciation House. I want to thank all the members of the media who are here today, because I believe it's really helpful to be able to provide periodic updates. Yo me llamo Rubén García, yo soy el director de la Casa Annunciación aquí del Paso. Le agradezco a todos los miembros de los medios de comunicación que están presentes esta mañana. Creo que es un servicio importante poder ofrecerle a la comunidad información de lo que está pasando aquí en la frontera. I think most people know that there have been now for months, there have been releases by Border Patrol and ICE, and as well as the ports of entry, OFO. There have been releases of refugees that are not detained, that they're processed and then they are released. When they are released, so as to avoid having them released to the street, Annunciation House has been contacted to see about being able to receive the refugees and provide them hospitality while we make contact with family and friends who are able to then purchase plane tickets or bus tickets, and then it's possible to take the families, the individuals, to the airport, to the bus stations, and they can be on their way. I'd like to start this morning by clarifying some things so that everyone is aware of some basic information. The overwhelming number of individuals or families that are released do not remain in the city of El Paso. They move on to be reunited with family and friends that they have in the United States. I would say that the percentage literally is in the neighborhood of 99.99%, almost 100% of everyone that is released by Border Patrol, ICE, or the ports of entry move on to other parts of the United States. I want to make sure that everybody understands that everyone who is released by immigration is in fact in removal proceedings. Sometimes you hear in the media some incorrect assumptions or presumptions that when someone is released, that they basically have been given carte blanche to remain in the United States. And that is totally, completely, and categorically incorrect. No one, upon being processed, is given permission to remain in the United States. Everyone still is going to face the immigration process, and they're going to have to establish their own credible fear petition, and whether or not they're going to succeed in obtaining asylum is something that an immigration judge will decide. And I know that many of the people that pass through our hospitality sites in the end are going to end up being deported. This may take several months. It could conceivably take a year or two, but that's the process. Esta mañana quería empezar aclarando ciertas cosas que a veces no se comunican bien en los medios de comunicación. Es que cuando inmigración detiene a una persona, a un refugiado, que sea individuo, que sea familia, y no van a tener cupo para detenerlos, los sueltan, y para evitar que los suelten a la calle, le llaman a la Casa Anunciación para ver si la red de albergues que la Casa Anunciación coordina pueden recibirlo y evitar que la persona quede en la calle. Así es que eso es algo que hemos estado haciendo por meses. Eso no es reciente, tenemos mucho tiempo haciendo eso. Quería aclarar que nadie de estas personas, ninguno de los refugiados, que después de haber sido procesados por inmigración y luego ha sido dado libre para que ellos puedan proceder con sus familiares, nadie se les está dando derecho de permanecer en los Estados Unidos permanentemente. Todos, sin excepción, todos están en el proceso de deportación. Así es que cada individuo, cada familia va a tener que presentarse frente a un juez de migración y allí pelear su caso de asilo. Si logran convencer el juez les va a conceder asilo. Si no lo logran, el juez va a ordenar que la persona sea deportada. Así es que yo no tengo duda que mucha de la gente que está pasando por nuestros albergues, al fin va a resultar siendo deportados. Es que es algo importante que aclaremos, ¿ok? La segunda cosa que quisiera aclarar es el concepto de lo que se llama el título 42. Desde el principio del título 42, hace más de 2 años, desde el principio que se implementó el título 42, no todas personas estaban incluidos en el proceso de ser expulsados. Había nacionalidades que no expulsaban. Esto casi nunca se hablaba, pero desde el principio había ciertas nacionalidades que por motivo político con sus países no fueron expulsados. Lo que ha estado pasando durante los últimos 2 años es que ha estado incrementando refugiados de esos países, y eso es una de las causas principales por cual el número de refugiados que inmigración ha estado soltando últimamente ha estado incrementando. The next thing that I would like to clarify is a misconception of Title 42. From the beginning of Title 42, not all nationalities were included as eligible for expulsion. Not very much was said about that in the beginning, and the numbers from those nationalities was actually very, very slow. So, in fact, the majority of nationalities that were being expelled were the more traditional nationalities that we see here on the border, namely people from El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras. They were being expelled almost completely. What has happened over the past 2 years is that the numbers of individuals, refugees, from nationalities that do not lend themselves for expulsion has been increased. And as a result of that, the number of individuals that immigration and its 3 branches, ICE, Border Patrol, and OFO, who staff the ports of entry, have been releasing more of those individuals. And the reason for that is that there simply isn't detention capacity. You know, immigration simply doesn't have the holding capacity for the numbers. And so as a result of that, as an example, last week, Sunday through Saturday of this past week, Border Patrol, ICE, and OFO released 2,700 refugees to the Annunciation House network. That was in 1 week. Right now, as of today, Wednesday, we have already received 1,730 refugees up to today, Wednesday. Most of the nationalities that we are seeing are individuals or families from Cuba, from Haiti, from Venezuela, from Nicaragua, from Turkey, some from Russia. Those are small numbers, and they're not being expelled. There are there are reasons, and I'm sure they're political, but it is what it is. For example, if you are a Haitian family, there's a very good possibility you will not get expelled. If you are a Haitian single adult, there's a very good possibility that you will get expelled, that after you are detained, you are sent to Laredo, Texas, and there from Laredo, you are flown back to Haiti. And so these nationalities, the numbers of these nationalities has been increasing, and this has placed a burden on the holding capacity, especially the holding capacity of Border Patrol that has a very large, what is known as the Central Processing Center. And that holding capacity reaches a point where they've got to release. They've got to release. The capacity of Annunciation House to receive the numbers of refugees that need to be released is something that fluctuates during the week. Right now, Annunciation House has in its umbrella of hospitality sites that are primarily church connected. It has 15, a total, including the Annunciation House operated buildings that we have. There's a total of 15 hospitality sites. There's one in Deming. There are 3 in Las Cruces. There is one in Albuquerque, and the rest are here in El Paso. So we have 15 different hospitality sites. Each one of those hospitality sites, however, does not receive refugees every single day. So there may be a church that says, Ruben, I can receive 70 refugees on Monday, but I cannot receive refugees the other days of the week. And so this is why the capacity that we have to receive fluctuates day to day. And as an example of that, on Sunday, the capacity that we had was for 387 individuals. It was determined that they had to release more than that, and as a result, 119 single adults were released to the street there in the parking lot of one of the bus companies in downtown El Paso. And so there was a clear example of what we expect is we're going to see more of that as we go forward. You all can contact Border Patrol, ICE, et cetera, and get the numbers from them. A key number is the daily apprehensions that Border Patrol is doing presently. That's the key number, because the greater the number of individuals that are apprehended on a particular day, you can estimate that 65% of them are eligible to be expelled. The rest fall into this category of nationalities that cannot be or are not being expelled. They're going to get processed, and then they're going to be in the holding area of Border Patrol, and then they're going to say, we have to release them. We just can't keep bottling up people. And so that's where the request to us comes. How many can you take on Sunday, on Monday, on Tuesday, and Wednesday? Our ability to receive is directly connected to the number of hospitality sites that we have. Obviously, we are working very, very hard to try and bring more hospitality sites online. The reality, however, today, in 2022, May 18th, the reality today is that it has gotten significantly more difficult to recruit the volunteers that are necessary to operate the hospitality sites for the NGOs. It just has become much more difficult. There's been tons of discussion about that, and certainly COVID is a major aspect of that. Individuals that are now reluctant to expose themselves to become involved. But then some people have offered to me that to what extent has the vilification that has been going on in our culture of people that are different from us, and namely the refugee that has been going on, and how much of that has contributed to people holding back and not wanting to do hospitality at their church site, etc. We have the hope that going forward, that number of 15 sites will become 16 and 17 and 18 and 19 and 20. We have the hope that that one site in Albuquerque will become 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, so that it begins to reflect something more comparable to what we had in 2018, 2019, when the number of hospitality sites was significantly greater than what we presently have right now. I want to bring emphasis to the fact that this is happening right now pre a final decision on whether or not Title 42 will in fact be lifted on May the 23rd, basically next week. President Biden, the Biden administration announced that it was their intention to lift Title 42 on the 23rd of May. I know that all of the governmental entities have been extremely busy working to try and prepare and get ready for all of the implications that the lifting of Title 42. I know that we as an NGO coalition is very conscious of what that might mean. I have to say to you very honestly that if right now that Title 42 has not been lifted, we've already seen the first day when there were releases to the street. I have absolutely no doubt that if in fact Title 42 is lifted on May the 23rd, you're going to see many individuals having to be released to the street. It will, without question, overwhelm the NGO capacity. For that reason, I know that all of you are aware that the city-county has been putting great pressure on the federal government to look seriously at the possibility of having the federal government open hospitality capacity. And specifically, they reference Fort Bliss, as many of you know, when the 10,000 plus Afghan refugees were transported from Afghanistan, and one of the sites that was selected to receive them was El Paso, and they activated what came to be known as the Afghan village in the Dona Anya part of the Fort Bliss complex, and an estimated 10,000 Afghan refugees were there. And so the city-county has been very vocal in calling on the federal government to activate Fort Bliss, potentially activate the space that was also used for the Afghan refugees at Holloman Air Force Base, to create greater hospitality space. Annunciation House joins in the calling for the opening of federal hospitality space. I want to be radically clear with you. We are not speaking about detention. We are speaking about hospitality capacity, where they open up the space with all of the requirements of hospitality, places to sleep, the meals, restrooms, showers, etc. Just as importantly, that their staffs have the capacity to begin to do travel arrangements so that as people arrive at that hospitality space, they are able to have their families buy them plane tickets and bus tickets and then move on. So we also, Annunciation House also calls for the opening of hospitality capacity, and that be done prior to the lifting of Title 42. If you're going to lift Title 42, You absolutely have got to have hospitality capacity beyond what the NGO network is able to bring to the table. But this morning, I am also calling on the city and county of El Paso to open up their own hospitality capacity. We need a three-pronged approach to hospitality in our border community. And those three prongs are your NGO network, all of the hospitality sites that can be brought online in El Paso, in Las Cruces, in Deming, in Albuquerque. That's one of the prongs. The second prong is what the city county of El Paso brings to the table and their identification of hospitality sites, venues that can be used in the same way that we're talking about for Bliss. And the third prong is the federal government's bringing online hospitality, so that each one of those prongs gets together and that each one of those prongs is able to answer the question, how many beds do I bring to the table? And if I don't bring any beds to the table, then you all are the ones that have to ask the question, why are you not preparing to bring beds to the table, especially given that already we've seen one release to the street. We are acknowledging the limitations of capacity right now prior to Title 42 being lifted. What might we expect once Title 42 is lifted? I am concerned that if Title 42 is lifted, that we will find ourselves with people pointing fingers at each other, which will do absolutely nothing to bring even one more bed or cot to the table. And so now is the time. On Sunday, after the release to the street was done, I received a call from the Office of Emergency Management letting me know that they were looking at the possibility of freeing some of the personnel that had been involved at the height of the pandemic, individuals that had been working with the Office of Epidemiology for the city, as well as OEM, individuals who were doing that, but who now that the COVID positivity rate has been going down very significantly, there are individuals who may be available to be transitioned into a position where they could be available. And so I received a call on Sunday, and that resulted in a follow-up meeting that very Sunday, letting me know that an initial 25 individuals were being made available specifically to Casa del Refugiado. Yesterday, Tuesday, 29 of those individuals actually arrived here at Casa del Refugiado to begin a process of orientation, and then also to be able to allow people to decide for themselves, is this the kind of work I want to do? Now these are paid employees, and is working with the refugees with all that involves. You know, we're working with human beings, and do I want to do this? So 29 of them were here yesterday. We had orientation, going through the building, people got involved, et cetera. And that number is expected to increase. The second thing that I'm calling about when I call upon the city and the county to look at them opening up hospitality sites is I am specifically calling on them to consider having the city county take over the operation of Casa del Refugiado. If they are able to free up employees that can be assigned here to look at the very real possibility of taking over this particular hospitality site, that would allow the Annunciation House volunteers to withdraw so that we could then focus those volunteers on some of the other church sites that are receiving refugees once per week, but that could receive refugees throughout the week, but they can't because they don't have the volunteers. So part of today is to try and update you as to what is happening, to acknowledge that we've seen our first release to the street. In my opinion, that's not the end of it. I think there's going to be more releases to the street as I look at hospitality capacities from churches and NGOs for tomorrow, Thursday and Friday and Saturday. That capacity is not what is available to us on other days of the week, and I'm concerned that during this week we may end up seeing more street releases. Quisiera dar un resumen de lo que acabo de decir. Estoy explicando que al momento la Casa de Anunciación tiene una red de albergues que consiste de 15 distintos albergues, no todos los cuales tienen la capacidad de funcionar los 7 días de la semana. Hay algunos de esos albergues que nomás pueden recibir refugiados una vez por semana, por ejemplo. Muchas veces porque no tienen los voluntarios necesarios para poder operar los otros días de la semana. Quiero explicar que la semana pasada, de domingo a sábado de la semana pasada, recibimos aproximadamente 2,700 refugiados, personas que Inmigración soltó después de procesarlos a la Casa de Anunciación y que fueron recibidos en los 15 diferentes albergues que forman parte de la red. Esta semana, ahora miércoles, estamos a 1,730 refugiados que nos han entregado hasta ahora. Los albergues que forman parte de la red de la Casa de Anunciación, porque no pueden recibir refugiados todos los días de la semana, el número que podemos recibir cada día de la semana varía. Hay ciertos días de la semana que más albergues pueden recibir que en otros días. Así es que ese número sube y baja. Ahora toca que tenemos la capacidad de recibir 508 y vamos a recibir 508 refugiados. Mañana, jueves, no vamos a tener esa capacidad y va a bajar el número que podemos recibir. Así es que la inhabilidad de poder recibir el número de refugiados que Inmigración tiene que soltar, va a haber días que no concuerda y vamos a ver refugiados que son soltados a la calle. Esto es lo que pasó el domingo cuando nosotros recibimos 387 refugiados, pero Inmigración tuvo que soltar 119 más y soltaron 119 adultos solteros en el estacionamiento de uno de los centrales de autobús en el centro de El Paso. Estoy explicando que la ciudad y el condado de El Paso le ha estado pidiendo al gobierno federal fuertemente que el gobierno federal se involucre a implementar espacio de hospitalidad para recibir los refugiados que están siendo soltados en la misma manera que hizo el gobierno federal cuando recibieron los refugiados de Afganistán y abrieron ese espacio aquí en la propiedad de la base militar de Fort Bliss. Recibieron más de 10,000 refugiados. También abrieron espacio en la base militar de Holloman Air Force Base. Así es que la ciudad y el condado han estado haciendo una llamada al gobierno federal, una llamada muy fuerte diciendo, ustedes tienen que también apoyar en ofrecer hospedaje a los que están soltando. La Casa de Anunciación esta mañana se une con la ciudad y el condado en fuertemente pidiéndole al gobierno federal que abra espacio de hospedaje. Quiero aclarar muy fuertemente que no estamos hablando de espacio de detención. estamos hablando de espacio de hospedaje en el mismo sentido que ustedes van a ver aquí en la casa del refugiado, donde la gente es recibida, se les ofrece dónde dormir, dónde comer, dónde bañarse, y sobre todo apoyo en comunicarse con sus familiares, sus patrocinadores, para que ellos les puedan comprar pasaje por avión o por autobús y puedan proceder. El 99% de todos los refugiados, familias o individuos, que inmigración suelta, sale del Paso, no se quedan. Casi es 100% que salen. Así es que no se quedan en el Paso, y francamente la gran mayoría no se quiere quedar en el Paso. Ellos quieren proceder para reunirse con familia o amistades, conocidos que tienen en los Estados Unidos. Después que se soltó los 119 este domingo temprano, la oficina de el manejo de emergencia de la ciudad del condado me llamó y pidió una reunión para informarse que se había tomado la decisión de identificar empleados de la ciudad del condado que pudieran transferir y asignarlos aquí a la casa del refugiado, con el fin de ayudar a poder manejar la casa del refugiado y incrementar la capacidad aquí en la casa del refugiado, porque se nos está dificultando a la casa de Anunciación, se nos está dificultando inmensamente nuestra habilidad de reclutar voluntarios. El número de voluntarios ha disminuido mucho, que sea por eso de la pandemia o otros motivos, pero se nos ha dificultado muchísimo poder identificar y reclutar voluntarios que nos ayuden a manejar un sitio del tamaño. Así es que la ciudad del condado nos avisó que iban a empezar a asignar ciertos empleados para que esto se convirtiera como ese lugar de empleo. El martes, ayer, se presentaron 29 de ellos aquí y tuvimos todo un día de orientación con el fin de que ellos supieran exactamente dónde van a trabajar, cuál va a ser el trabajo, y que ellos también pudieran decidir si esto es algo que ellos quieren hacer. Así es que a lo mejor no todos los 29 van a querer seguir trabajando aquí. No sé cuál va a ser el número final. Y luego también van a ver otros empleados del condado que también van a ser asignados. Este lugar, la casa del refugiado, es un sitio, un albergue inmenso, muy grande. La casa de Anunciación no ha podido manejar la casa del refugiado a su capacidad completo, aunque ahorita ha incrementado muchísimo. Anoche tuvimos 369 refugiados durmiendo aquí. Así es que ya estamos hablando de números bastante significantes. Hay otra mitad del edificio que no estamos usando como albergue por la falta de los voluntarios, del personal para poder manejarlo. Esta mañana, en la misma manera que estamos llamando al gobierno federal que ellos también estén involucrados en ofrecer albergue y abrir sitios de hospedaje para los refugiados. En ese mismo sentido, la Casa de Anunciación esta mañana está llamando que la ciudad y el condado también vean cómo ellos pueden abrir albergues para compartir la responsabilidad, especialmente si llega el momento que se hace a un lado el título 42 y que ya no exista, en el cual yo espero que vamos a ver una ola. Si ahorita, que todavía no se levanta el título 42, ya vimos el primer día que hubo personas soltadas a la calle, se pueden imaginar lo que va a pasar cuando se levanta el título 42. La capacidad, la habilidad de nuestra comunidad fronteriza de poder manejar el número de refugiados que se espera y poder manejarlos en una manera positiva, digna, va a necesitar tres componentes. Se va a necesitar el componente de la red de todas las ONGs, la red que es compuesta por iglesias y ONGs. Ese es uno de los componentes. El segundo componente es los albergues que la ciudad y el condado abren para también poder recibir refugiados. Y el tercer componente va a ser el gobierno federal y la capacidad de albergue que el gobierno federal puede también traer a la mesa. Creo que llegamos a un momento donde tenemos que tener una reunión con los miembros de la ONG, miembros de la ciudad y el condado, miembros del gobierno federal, y en esa reunión que cada uno pueda decir cuántos catres, cuántas camas podemos ofrecer, podemos poner sobre la mesa de la capacidad que nosotros podemos recibir. Nosotros estamos pidiendo que la ciudad y el condado consideren tomar control de la casa del refugiado, que ellos se hagan responsable por este albergue porque es tan grande, y que se hagan responsable de tomar para permitir que la casa Anunciación pueda retirar los voluntarios que tenemos aquí para dedicarlos a otras iglesias que ya están recibiendo, pero que nomás reciben un día por semana por falta de voluntarios. Así es que con eso, with that, I open it up for questions.
Mencionaba que le gustaría que el gobierno federal tuviera ya un refugio antes del 23 de mayo. ¿Realmente cree que sea posible?
Para decirle la verdad, no lo sé. Yo sé que hubo un viaje a la frontera precisamente para ver esos sitios, para ver si se pudieran. Así es que yo no sé qué resultó de ese viaje, pero absolutamente ya, miren, ahora tenemos suficiente cupo entre 7 distintos albergues. Esta mañana 7 de los 15 van a recibir, y vamos a poder recibir 508. Mañana jueves no tenemos 7. El viernes y el sábado y el domingo son aún menos, porque el espacio que a veces iglesias ofrecen es el mismo espacio que ellos necesitan los fines de semana para las actividades con los fieles de la iglesia. Así es que no pueden recibir, así es que disminuya el número de personas que puedan recibir. Ahí es donde yo me preocupo que vamos a ver otra vez que soltaron a la calle. Así es que vamos a ver.
¿Cómo ve el balance en este caso? El juez federal ha puesto una pausa y se espera que antes del 23 pueda decidir si se va a quitar el título 42 o no. Organizaciones que defienden los derechos de los migrantes están exigiendo que simplemente se quite el título 42. ¿Cómo se pone el balance en esta petición que hacen para que se le garantice la posibilidad de pedir asilo, y del otro lado que haya ese tiempo para que entonces puedan acomodarse las posibilidades para ellos?
Miren, cuando el presidente Biden se lanzó para la presidencia, una de las cosas que él dijo, que si él fuera elegido, que él tenía la intención de levantar el título 42. Ya sabemos que ya es casi año y medio desde que él tomó el poder y no lo ha levantado. Se anunció que se iba a levantar el 23 de mayo. Sabemos que hay mucha política alrededor de eso, y aún hay demandas en la Corte Federal. Ahorita, en realidad, hay una orden federal judicial que prohíbe el levantar del título 42. Así es que cuando el 23 de mayo llegue, no sabemos si se va a levantar o no se va a levantar. ¿Okay? Así es que vamos a tener que esperar a ver qué pasa. La Casa Anunciación siempre ha creído que el título 42 nunca se debía de haber implementado de principio. porque no fue política de salud, no fue política de pandemia, fue política de enforzar la frontera, que la usaron debajo, la escondieron detrás de la pandemia. Pero bueno, ya estamos aquí ahorita. Desde el momento que la administración de Biden tomó el poder, ellos sabían que pronto o tarde iba a llegar el momento que el título 42 se va a tener que quitar. Les corresponde a ellos haber preparado. Que están o no están preparados, esa es pregunta muy buena que se tiene que dirigir al gobierno federal. Okay?
Mr. Garcia, apologies.
Yes.
Apologies if you addressed this already. Can you speak to the capacity you had in 2019 as part of the network today, and what you anticipate seeing, in the next coming months, if what the need is?
In 2018, 2019, we were able to build a capacity that allowed us to receive on a regular basis 500 plus releases per day and up to 1,000 releases per day. That was our capacity. 2018, 2019, however, included the opening up of hotels. There were periods, there was one period in particular that I remember really well, where we were making use of 5 different hotels. You can imagine the volunteer capacity that is required to open up all those hotels, and right now, we're simply not succeeding in identifying and recruiting the volunteers. To all of you who watch parts of this press conference, I'm asking you to use the people of Poland as an example to us of what they have done in the face of the multi-million exodus of Ukrainians, and Poland stepping forward and saying, this is what it means to be a human being, and so for us, this is what it means to be a human being. Okay?
When you talk about hoping that the federal government, county, and city, and the network being able to come together and not having to point fingers once something happens, can you talk to what you feel is the appetite right now to have that discussion, and if you feel like that can happen sooner or later?
I don't want to speak for the city and the county. I mean, I have a good sense of both the city and the county and the federal government. I have a good sense of what their posture is, but I don't think it's my place to speak about that. I think it's your role to go to the city and the county and to ask them. It is extremely helpful to have the city, county come and say, we're making these employees available to you. So I have no doubt of it. I simply think that's half the step that needs to be taken. The full step is we want to sit with you and look at the possibility of the city, county having this as their first hospitality site, and they take responsibility for Casa Refugiado as a first step. There are some officials that believe that once Title 42 is lifted, that the numbers may become so great that it exceeds anything that the city, county can do, the NGOs can do, and I agree with that. I think that it will exceed. However, that is not a reason for everyone who can bring something to the table to bring it to the table. We should not use that as a reason for not doing what we can do. I think the federal government clearly has a major responsibility, and I'm hoping that they will rise to the occasion. I don't know what goes on behind closed doors in the White House, so we'll have to wait and see. So I really believe the federal government clearly has a role in this and is obligated to help out with the hospitality to receive people. There's already been a lot of water that has passed under the bridge of things that could have been done prior to this moment that would have alleviated where we are right now. There could have been other ways of processing refugees before they ever got to the border, or in Juarez, before they attempt to cross. There are things that could have been done that were not done. And my concern is that if Title 42 is lifted, you're going to see a wave, and it's clearly going to surpass the capacity of your NGO structure, and then you're going to have a lot of people going around talking to officials, et cetera, and I think at that point you're going to see a lot of finger pointing, and that's not going to bring one table, one cot, one bed to the table. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Garcia, do you think it's acceptable that the county and the city have not created a hospitality site yet? I mean, we're already seeing these large increases, we've seen large increases before, especially El Paso, you know, our area, we're known to have these migrant releases. Is that acceptable to you?
In 2018, well, in 2018, 2019, there was no Border Patrol Central Processing Center. It didn't exist. It just didn't exist. As a result of that, the Border Patrol substations had to be used to hold people before they were released, and they were overcrowded, and there were a lot of stories. And I remember Homeland Security Secretary McAleenan testifying before Congress saying those facilities were never meant to hold, and they're very inadequate. And there were lots of stories as to what all of that did. At that time, when Border Patrol would apprehend refugees and they would process them, they would turn them over to ICE. ICE would prepare the final documents, and then ICE would text me and say, Ruben, right now we have X number that are going to get released. As the number of refugees that Border Patrol apprehended did this on the graph, slowly kept doing this, it surpassed the capacity of ICE to process the numbers. And it reached a point where ICE said to me, Ruben, we just can't process the numbers that Border Patrol is apprehending. And so we're going to cap it off. We're telling Border Patrol we're going to cap it off. And they did. And said, we can handle maybe 500 per day, 600, but then beyond that, Border Patrol. And so Border Patrol then notified me that they were going to begin to release people as well as ICE. There was a very, very short moment when Border Patrol attempted to transport the people that ICE wasn't able to receive, that Border Patrol was going to release, and transport them to our hospitality sites. At that time, Border Patrol did not have buses. They now have buses, but in 2018, 2019, they didn't have buses. So they had to transport with their vans, and very quickly it became obvious this just wasn't going to work. So Border Patrol made the decision to begin to release refugees at the Greyhound bus stop in Deming and the Greyhound bus stop in Las Cruces. They didn't ask the cities, they just released them. I got a phone call that day telling me this was going to begin to happen, and I said, oh my God, you know, totally unprepared. And so they started releasing them. What we saw was the city of Deming galvanized itself, and they found an airplane hangar and converted it into a hospitality site, and they worked to bring cots, etc., so that now they could say to Border Patrol, don't release them to the street, bring them to the hangar, and they did. What Las Cruces did is they had an old armory, and they went to the armory and they activated it, and they put in cots, etc., to say to Border Patrol, don't release them to the street, bring them to the armory. So we saw 2 city governments take those steps. In El Paso, the city of El Paso never took that step in 2018, 2019. It remained primarily the responsibility of Annunciation House. The churches in the Las Cruces area that were hospitality sites under the Annunciation House umbrella, we said to them, we're not going to send anybody anymore because you're now having releases right there in your city. You focus on now receiving along with the armory and what have you. So there toward the end of that surge, we started identifying churches as far away as Dallas and Denver. And we actually sent 4 chartered buses, 2 to Denver, 2 to Dallas, to increase the capacity of where the refugees were being. So it is not something that the city county of El Paso has thus far done up to this point. Clearly, they're making employees available and saying, Ruben, we want to help you staff CDR. Incredibly grateful for that. I just want them to go one step further and say, we want to sit down and talk to you about, let's us just take over Casa Refugiado and we'll operate it. What volunteers you've got here, you then focus them on the churches that are not able to open up all the days of the week so that it increases the capacity. To have the city of El Paso make available 25 individuals who want to work here, and that's a key thing, and that's something that we addressed yesterday when the 29 individuals showed up. I just very frankly said to them, look, you've got to want to do this. These are human beings, and hospitality is an especially special word. To offer hospitality, you've got to make sure this is what you want to do. And as you go through the day-to-day, you need to decide, do you want to do this, or you want to go back to the city and say, I want to be assigned some other place, and we hope that that's what happens. But for the city of El Paso and for the county of El Paso to say, we've got to, as they say, have skin in the game. We've got to start looking at employees that we can bring. That's fantastic. We just want them to go the complete step that Deming, New Mexico did, that Las Cruces did, to go the full step and say, we understand we are going to have to operate some hospitality sites. Yes?
Ruben, is it possible that other communities, like the ones you mentioned, Las Cruces, Deming, may also get involved in San Bernardino?
They are involved already. Today, 100 of the 508 are going to Las Cruces. They're already, and they've been involved. The network that Annunciation House oversees is not something Annunciation House operates. These are all separate, independent churches that recruit their own volunteers, that offer their own space, that receive them, that do the meals, that do the contact with their sponsors. They're golden. They're just golden. They're living examples of the gospel, and they're doing it, and they're the ones, these 508 today, the ones released yesterday, the ones that will be released tomorrow, they're the ones that are receiving it,
I meant the involvement of the city governments and Cruces and Deming. Is it possible that you'll work with them the same way you want to work with El Paso?
Well, I can't answer that question. That's a question you're going to have to ask them. I would speculate that if Title 42, when Title 42 is eventually lifted, and if we see a wave, if Border Patrol begins to release in other geographical areas other than El Paso, I think that that's going to obligate those cities to again look at its past and the possibility of releasing, of setting up hospitality sites in addition to the NGOs, which are primarily churches in the Las Cruces area.
But you have not contacted them the way you've contacted them?
No, because we are the NGO leg of this thing. Our focus is finding additional hospitality capacity among the churches. So go to the churches. Okay.
Yes, sir. Can you talk about worst case scenario if Title 42 is lifted? What happens if you see hundreds of people being released onto the streets of El Paso?
Well, I hope you realize that none of you get to leave without leaving your home address, because you're all going to get releases to your homes. I'm very hesitant to want to speculate on that. 2018, 2019 saw a pretty significant surge. That wasn't the first surge, okay? The very first surge occurred in 2014 when Obama was president. And so we begun to activate hospitality sites at that point. So it's not the first time. And when you look at 2018, 2019, that fiscal year, the network of hospitality sites was able to receive 150,000 refugees. Is it possible to replicate that, given how difficult it's become to identify and recruit volunteers? I don't know that we're going to be able to replicate that. What I also know is that in 2018, 2019, the federal government was not involved with any hospitality capacity. I also know that in 2018, 2019, the city of El Paso, County of El Paso, also was not involved. So if they become involved, it raises my belief that we will be able to handle it, that between the three prongs, we will be able to handle it.
In general, what's the downside of having people released into the streets as opposed to being received by hospitality sites?
Obviously, there's a huge world of difference between releasing a 24-year-old young man, a 24-year-old young woman who is single, releasing them to the street, and to release a mom with 2 kids, a mom and dad with 3 kids, a dad with 2 kids. There's a huge difference. And if you release families to the street, it becomes extremely challenging. You're going to have lots of people knocking on the doors of churches, especially in the downtown areas, because that's where the releases have historically taken place, So in 2018, 2019, there were three occasions that I can remember where there were releases to the street. One of those that took place in December on a very cold night, and they were released to the street, 150 people, almost all of them families, with young children, etc. And Sun Metro, OEM got Sun Metro to send buses so that all the people could be put onto the buses, and the heating system of the buses is what kept people warm, while we found a solution. That solution ended up being we opened up a hotel. Annunciation House opened up a hotel. You can't imagine how challenging it was from one moment to the other because of the volunteers. The expense is also part of it, but right now, even more than the expense is the volunteers, to recruit the volunteers to staff it. So on Sunday, could someone have asked me, Ruben, why don't you open up a hotel to absorb the 119? I don't have the volunteers. I might be able to get the financial resources to pay for the rooms. I just don't have the volunteers. I can't staff it. So, yes, ma'am.
Sir, what is the role or types of volunteers that you need, and what are the qualifications that you're looking for?
Everyone who volunteers, we ask them to be fully COVID vaccinated and boosted, okay? We've had approximately, here at this particular site, we've had approximately 30 volunteers test positive for COVID. Because they've all been vaccinated and boosted, there have been no serious COVID cases. We've not even had to call a doctor to consult they've all had symptoms that were light enough. They obviously isolated, they quarantined, etc. But this is why we require everyone to be COVID tested and boosted. Secondly, we require that everybody have a background check done so that everyone comes to us with a background check. Thirdly, we ask that everyone understand the seriousness of a commitment. There are individuals who will say to me, Ruben, I don't speak any Spanish. And so there's no point in my trying to work directly with the people because I don't understand it, et cetera. But I can do other things. We have a mountain of laundry. We've got a laundry room here. So I can come every Saturday from 9 in the morning to 1. Those for every Saturday. I'll be one of your laundry people. I'll come in and for 4 hours. The seriousness of the commitment is that they understand that if I say I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it. I joke with people and I say there's one reason why you tell me you're going to come and you don't come, and that's because you died. Okay? So don't tell me you want to volunteer if you don't understand the seriousness of the commitment. There are individuals here that we have trained to be what we call shift coordinators. These are individuals that are actually coordinating the entire facility for an 8-hour shift, and they're volunteers, and they've got a day of the week that they're able to do that. They do the morning shift, they do the PM shift. There are other volunteers who come that can come 2 times per week that speak Spanish, and they can come in the late afternoon, early evening, and they're going to be our transportation people. And so they're going to sit down with every refugee family. Okay, give me the contact person. Let's call your cousin. Let's call your aunt, your uncle, your brother, sister, son, daughter, whatever. And they've been released. They're here. We now need you. Go get a plane ticket. Go get a bus ticket and call us back, so that they can be on their way and they can free up a bed and we can receive someone else. So from doing laundry to helping to sanitize the shower stalls, to helping to serve the meals, to working in the clothing room and sorting clothing, to registering people, to doing shift coordinate, there's a lot. But it requires fully COVID tested, vaccinated, background check, and the commitment, the absolute commitment that I'm not going to offer myself if I'm not going to be faithful. And we ask people to think in terms of at least 3 months. So if I'm going to come 4 hours every Saturday, that I think about 3 months. At the end of 3 months, I can take a break, or I can say, you know, Ruben, I've really enjoyed this, and I want to commit for another 3 months. So.
Rubén, yo te quisiera preguntar, ya a nivel personal, ¿cómo te sientes que a pesar de que tuvimos 2 años para prepararnos, o al menos un mes desde que se anunció que posiblemente ya se iba a quitar el título 42, no se ha hecho nada?
Me tiene que ayudar a entender lo que está diciendo cuando dice que no se ha hecho nada.
Por parte del gobierno local, del condado y del gobierno federal en cuestión de tener sitios preparados para recibir a los migrantes.
Okay. Yo creo, le agradezco mucho su pregunta porque un aspecto del cual no he hablado es que durante toda esta etapa hemos estado siendo apoyados concretamente en las siguientes maneras por la ciudad y el condado. Uno es, toda la gente que llega aquí, nosotros le hacemos la prueba de COVID a todos. El condado son los que nos entregan las pruebas para hacerlos. Es que ellos nos traen, nos reemplazan. Es que eso es algo que nos ha ayudado a poder mantener un control, yo creo que es muy bueno aquí con lo que tiene que ser con la pandemia. Segundo, el condado, la ciudad y el condado nos ha apoyado con transportación. Se ha hecho un contrato con el proyecto Amistad, donde ellos están usando sus vehículos. Ellos posiblemente cuando ustedes salgan van a ver el shuttle del proyecto Amistad que viene a recoger a personas que van a transportar al aeropuerto y a las centrales de autobús. Cuando el número que se tienen que transportar al aeropuerto o al central es más grande de la capacidad del cupo de los shuttles, porque son pequeños, como para 15, 16 personas. Sun Metro ha mandado uno de sus autobuses grandes, así que nos han apoyado con eso también. Así es que el condado y la ciudad ha estado pendiente de lo que está pasando. Y obviamente la ciudad y el condado han estado increíblemente activos en sus comunicaciones con el gobierno federal para empujar y empujar y empujar al gobierno federal que abran espacio de hospedaje, y la Casa de Anunciación totalmente está de acuerdo con eso. La ciudad y el condado están manejando un hotel que está dedicado exclusivamente para ofrecer albergue de cuarentena para las personas que resultan positivas. Anoche, una familia, mamá, papá, con sus 2 niños, un miembro resultó positivo, los transportamos al hotel, la oficina del manejo de emergencia maneja el hotel, les dan el cuarto, el Ejército de Salvación les trae las comidas y hacen sus días de cuarentena para que entonces puedan salir. Así es que no está correcto decir que no han hecho nada, porque han hecho mucho en el proceso.
Un sitio, cama disponible.
Eso es algo que está pendiente y por eso es parte del propósito de esta rueda de prensa, para decir, primero, agradecer inmensamente que ellos han tomado el paso de identificar empleados que se pudieran ser dedicados al trabajo de hospitalidad. Nosotros queremos que tomen el paso completo y que actualmente se hagan cargo y que se considere esto su primer sitio de hospedaje de la ciudad y el condado. Okay. Thank you all very, very much. Teva, would you walk them to the Blue Room? And they've all been told that they can take video, they can take photos, as long as there are no identification of individuals, okay? And our experience with the media is that they have been incredibly ethical about that, so I don't have any concerns that they will. So if you just simply show them